camera never blinks, it never sleeps, and it never forgets. In the shadows of our modern world, hidden in plain sight, millions of electronic eyes watch our every move. Shopping centers, train stations, dark alleyways, they record everything. The mundane, the extraordinary, and sometimes the unthinkable. What you're about to witness are 5 chilling cases where surveillance cameras became the silent witnesses to murder. Cases where killers believed they'd gotten away with the perfect crime until a grainy piece of footage proved otherwise. Where predators thought the darkness would protect them until the unblinking lens revealed their darkest secrets. From the streets of London to the corridors of Yale University, these are the stories of killers who didn't realize they were being watched. Stories where technology became the key to justice. Stories where every step, every gesture, every calculated move was caught on camera and led straight to a prison cell. This is 5-time CCTV caught killers red-handed. But before we dive into these disturbing cases, I need you to do something. Hit that subscribe button right now, because at the end of this video, I'm going to reveal something that will chill you to the bone, a shocking detail about one of these cases that even the trial didn't fully expose. A piece of evidence so disturbing, it was kept out of public record. Trust me, you won't want to miss it. Let's begin with a case that should have been solved in weeks, but instead became one of Britain's most shocking examples of investigative failure. London, England, August 2014. The body of 23-year-old Anthony Walgate was discovered slumped against a wall outside an apartment building in Barking, East London. His jeans were pulled down slightly, his shoes were placed neatly beside him. To passers-by in the early morning light, he looked like just another young man who'd had too much to drink. But Anthony Walgate was dead. The fashion student had traveled from his home in Hull to meet someone he'd connected with online. Someone who'd promised him money. Someone who'd promised him a good time. That someone was 39-year-old chef Stephen Port, and this was just the beginning of a killing spree that would claim 4 young lives. What Port didn't know, what he couldn't have known, was that the cameras were watching. Every step, every lie, every calculated move. When police arrived at the scene, they found Port himself hovering nearby, claiming he'd simply discovered the body. He seemed nervous, fidgety. Officers questioned him, but Port stuck to his story. He was just a concerned citizen doing his civic duty. But CCTV footage told a different story entirely. Security cameras captured Port on the evening of August 19th, dragging something heavy toward the exit of his apartment building. The timestamp, 4:07 a.m. The footage showed a man struggling with weight, stopping periodically, looking around nervously. Port was carrying Anthony Walgate's lifeless body, positioning it outside like a prop in some macabre theater. The cameras had caught him red-handed, but incredibly, police didn't pursue this lead aggressively enough. Port was charged only with perverting the course of justice, lying to police about how he found the body. He served just 8 months in prison, a slap on the wrist for disposing of a corpse, a slap on the wrist that would cost 3 more young men their lives. Because Stephen Port wasn't finished. On August 28, 2015, exactly 1 year and 9 days after Anthony Walgate's murder, 25-year-old Gabriel Kovari's body was found in the same graveyard, St. Margaret's Church Cemetery, just 400 meters from Port's flat. Like Anthony, Gabriel had been poisoned with a fatal overdose of the date rape drug, GHB. Then, just 3 weeks later, on September 20th, 2015, 22-year-old Daniel Whitworth was discovered in the exact same location. In Daniel's hand was a suicide note, a note claiming he'd accidentally killed Gabriel Kovari and couldn't live with the guilt. It was all a lie, a forgery. Police would later prove Stephen Port had written that note himself, framing a dead man for another dead man's murder. But the cameras kept watching. Port's final victim was 25-year-old Jack Taylor, found dead on September 14, 2015, near the same church graveyard. 4 young men, 4 murders, all within 13 months, all within a half-mile radius of Stephen Port's apartment. The pattern was impossible to ignore. Yet it had been ignored for over a year. It wasn't until Jack Taylor's family demanded answers, demanded police review the CCTV footage, that investigators finally connected the dots that had been there all along. Security cameras near Port's building showed him meeting Gabriel Kovari on August 24, 2015. The two entered Port's apartment together. Gabriel was never seen leaving alive. Footage from the train stations showed Port traveling alone to Barking Abbey ruins, carrying a bag. The timestamp matched the estimated time of Gabriel's death. More CCTV showed Port meeting Daniel Whitworth at Barking Station on September 18th. Again, both men walked toward Port's flat. Again, only Port returned. And with Jack Taylor, cameras captured the two meeting outside a gym, Port leading the young man away, his arm casually draped around Jack's shoulders like they were old friends. The unblinking eyes had recorded everything, every pickup, every journey, every carefully calculated move Stephen Port made as he lured vulnerable young men to their deaths. When police finally raided Port's apartment in October 2015, they found a chamber of horrors hidden in plain sight. Bottles of GHB, sex toys, lubricant, and on Port's computer, searches for unconscious boys, drug rape, and teenage boy overdose. The digital trail was just as damning as the physical one. Port had been researching how much GHB would kill a person. He'd visited websites about poisoning. He'd watched videos of unconscious men being sexually assaulted. The trial began in October 2016. Prosecutor Jonathan Rees QC laid out the evidence methodically, piece by piece, frame by frame of CCTV footage showing Port's movements matched perfectly with each victim's final hours. Port had a type, young gay men he'd meet on dating apps like Grindr. He'd offer them money or accommodation. Then he'd drug them with GHB, assault them while they were unconscious, and administer fatal doses while they couldn't resist. The jury took less than 2 days to reach their verdict. Guilty, 4 counts of murder, 4 counts of rape, multiple counts of sexual assault. On November 25, 2016, Justice Openshaw sentenced Stephen Port to life in prison with a whole life order, meaning he would never be released. The judge called his crimes wicked and dreadful, committed for Port's own sexual gratification. But the true horror wasn't just in Port's actions. It was in how long he'd been allowed to continue. 4 young men died because police failed to connect obvious patterns. 4 families lost sons because surveillance footage sat unwatched in evidence rooms. 4 murders that could have been prevented if investigators had simply looked at the cameras that had been recording everything. The CCTV had caught Stephen Port red-handed from the very first night. It just took too long for anyone to press play. Anthony Walgate, Gabriel Kovari, Daniel Whitworth, Jack Taylor. 4 names we must never forget. 4 young lives stolen in the shadows of London. But our next case takes us to a quiet park where a school teacher's evening walk became her last. Kidbrooke, Southeast London, September 17, 2021. 28-year-old Sabina Nessa stood in front of her bathroom mirror getting ready for a Friday evening out. The primary school teacher had plans to meet a friend at the Depot Bar in Kidbrooke Village, a 5-minute walk from her home on Astel Road. Just 5 minutes through Cator Park, a shortcut she'd taken countless times before. It was 8:30 p.m. when Sabina left her flat, her phone in hand, excited for the evening ahead. She would never arrive at that bar. She would never see her friend. She would never teach another class of eager first graders at Rushy Green Primary School. Because someone was waiting for her in the darkness of Cator Park. Someone who had traveled over 60 miles from Eastbourne specifically to kill a woman. Any woman. And the cameras were about to capture every horrifying second. 3 days before Sabina's murder, 36-year-old Koci Selamaj, a garage worker from Eastbourne, checked into the 5-star Grand Hotel in his hometown. He already had accommodation in Eastbourne, but he needed an alibi. He needed a reason to be away from home. He needed to create the appearance of normalcy while he planned something unspeakably evil. On the evening of September 17, Selamaj climbed into his silver Nissan Micra and began the hour-long drive to London. Traffic cameras along the A2 highway captured his vehicle heading north toward the capital. He arrived in Kidbrooke just after 8 p.m. CCTV footage shows Selamaj entering Cator Park at 8:03 p.m. carrying something long wrapped in a jacket, a 2-foot metal traffic warning triangle that he would use as a weapon. For the next 30 minutes, he lurked in the shadows, waiting, watching. The cameras captured him, loitering near different spots in the park, checking to see if anyone else was around, a predator selecting his hunting ground. At 8:34 p.m., Sabina Nessa entered the park. She was oblivious, walking quickly, slightly late for her date with her friend. She had no idea that she had just 34 seconds left to live. The CCTV footage is chilling in its clarity. Selamaj spotted Sabina from across the park. He checked his surroundings one final time to ensure no witnesses were present. Then he turned and ran straight at her from behind. Sabina never saw him coming. The cameras captured the exact moment Selamaj reached her, 8:34 p.m. and 42 seconds. He raised the metal traffic triangle high above his head and brought it down with devastating force onto Sabina's skull. Again, and again, and again. 34 times. The weapon shattered from the force of his blows, pieces breaking off and scattering across the park pathway. Sabina collapsed, unconscious, her life slipping away on a park bench where she should have been safe. The footage shows Selamaj dragging Sabina's limp body up a grassy slope and out of the camera's view, into dense undergrowth. For 10 minutes, the killer disappeared from sight. When he emerged, he was alone. At 8:56 p.m., just 22 minutes after the attack began, CCTV captured Selamaj calmly using wet wipes to clean the park bench where he had first struck Sabina. Wiping away blood, wiping away evidence. Moving with calculated precision, he gathered the broken pieces of his weapon, pocketed them, and walked back to his Nissan Micra. Traffic cameras traced Selamaj's route as he drove back toward Eastbourne, but he made one stop along the way. Near Tunbridge Wells in Kent, the car's GPS showed an 8-minute deviation from the main route. Selamaj pulled over near the River Taze and threw the remains of the traffic triangle into the water, watching it sink beneath the surface. At 12:04 a.m. on September 18th, Selamaj's Nissan Micra pulled into the parking lot of the Grand Hotel in Eastbourne. He checked in for his pre-booked room, maintaining his alibi. He slept peacefully that night while Sabina Nessa lay dead under a pile of leaves in Cator Park, just 200 meters from her home. The next afternoon, at 5:36 p.m. on September 18th, a dog walker discovered Sabina's body near the One Space Community Center in the park. Her corpse had been partially concealed with grass and leaves. The community was horrified. Just 6 months earlier, Sarah Everard had been murdered by a police officer only 8 miles away in Clapham. Now another young woman, another stranger attack, another life stolen. But this time the cameras had seen everything. Detective Chief Inspector Neil John led the investigation, and his team faced a monumental task. The nearest automatic number plate recognition camera, the only one Selamaj would have had to pass to reach Cator Park, was broken. Officers had to manually review footage from every ANPR camera within a 2-mile radius, searching for a silver Nissan Micra captured on the park's CCTV. More than 60 Nissan Micras had to be eliminated from the inquiry. Hundreds of hours of footage reviewed frame by frame. Then investigators found it, a vehicle registered to Koci Selamaj. The pattern was immediately suspicious. For an entire year, that car had remained in the Eastbourne area. Then, on the night of September 17th, it suddenly traveled to London for exactly 4 hours before returning to Eastbourne. When police cross-referenced Selamaj's phone records, they found an identical journey pattern. His mobile phone had pinged cell towers along the same route at the same times. The net was closing. On September 26th, 9 days after Sabina's murder, police raided Selamaj's Eastbourne home in an early morning operation. They found trainers stained with Sabina Nessa's blood, DNA evidence that placed him at the murder scene. He was arrested immediately and charged with murder the following day. In police interviews, Selamaj made no comment. He remained silent, offering no explanation, no alibi, no defense. But when formally charged, he asked officers a chilling question. What will happen if I open up now and say everything? He never did explain. To this day, Koci Selamaj has never revealed why he killed Sabina Nessa. At the Old Bailey on February 25, 2022, Selamaj pleaded guilty to murder at the start of his trial. The prosecution had built an overwhelming case using CCTV footage that documented his every movement that night. Prosecutor Alison Morgan QC described it as a premeditated and predatory attack on a complete stranger carried out with extreme violence. The court heard that Selamaj had a history of domestic violence against his ex-partner, including putting his hands around her throat in a strangling motion. The attack on Sabina was sexually motivated, though there was no positive evidence of sexual assault. Selamaj had driven to London specifically to attack a lone woman with brutal force. Sabina Nessa was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time, a victim selected at random by a monster. On April 7, 2022, Selamaj was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 36 years. He refused to attend his own sentencing hearing, a final act of cowardice. Mr. Justice Sweeney called Sabina the wholly blameless victim of an absolutely appalling murder, which was entirely the fault of the defendant. Selamaj will not be eligible for parole until April 30th, 2057. He will be 71 years old. In a statement read to the court, Sabina's parents asked her killer, "How could you do such a thing?" They said he was not a human being. Her sister, Jabina Yasmin Islam, told mourners at a vigil attended by more than 500 people, "We have lost an amazing, caring, beautiful sister who left this world far too early."
I just want to say thank you for everyone who came here to show the support and respect for my sister. We have lost an amazing, caring, beautiful sister who left this world far too early. She didn't reach her 29th birthday next month. Sabina loved her family. We had lost our sister. My parents have lost their daughter, and my girls have lost such a brilliant, loving, caring auntie who dearly loved her. Words cannot describe how we are feeling. This feels like we are stuck in a bad dream and can't get out of it. Our world is shattered. We have simply lost for words. No family should go through what we are going through. Once again, thank you for everyone for coming and showing your support for my sister. Thank you.
The CCTV footage that captured Sabina's final moments also captured her killer's every move. The cameras documented Selamaj's planning, his attack, his attempt to cover up his crime, and his escape. That footage became the foundation of the case that put him behind bars for life. Sabina Nessa was a dedicated teacher who loved her community. She was walking 5 minutes to meet a friend. She had her whole life ahead of her. The cameras couldn't save her, but they made sure her killer would never walk free again. From a London park to the halls of academia, our next case takes us across the Atlantic to one of America's most prestigious universities, where a brilliant young researcher vanished without a trace, until surveillance cameras revealed a killer hiding in plain sight. New Haven, Connecticut, September 8, 2009. Annie Lee had everything to live for. The 24-year-old pharmacology doctoral student at Yale University was 5 days away from marrying Jonathan Wadowski, the love of her life. Her white wedding dress hung in her closet. The invitations had been sent. The venue was booked. Friends and family were traveling from across the country to celebrate with the brilliant young researcher who dedicated her life to finding cures for diseases. That Tuesday morning, Annie left her apartment and took Yale Transit to Sterling Hall of Medicine. At exactly 10 a.m., security cameras captured her walking from Sterling Hall to another campus building at 10 Amistad Street, the Yale Animal Research Center where she conducted her experiments on mice. 75 security cameras monitored every entrance, every corridor, every room in that building. Access required Yale identification cards. It was one of the most secure facilities on campus. Annie Lee entered that building at 10 a.m. on September 8th. She was never seen leaving. What the cameras captured in the hours that followed would expose a workplace dispute that spiraled into murder. A crime so brutal, so calculated, that it shattered the illusion of safety at one of America's most prestigious universities. When Annie didn't return home that evening, her roommate reported her missing. Police immediately responded, reviewing the building's extensive security footage. The videos showed Annie entering at 10 a.m., walking confidently to the basement level where the research animals were housed. Her purse, cell phone, and Yale ID were later found in her office in a separate building, evidence she'd planned to return. But the cameras never showed her leaving 10 Amistad Street. Investigators locked down the entire facility. Every room was searched, every lab bench examined, every storage closet investigated. The FBI joined the Connecticut State Police and New Haven Police Department in what became an increasingly desperate search. On September 10th, 2 days after Annie's disappearance, police found something chilling hidden above a ceiling tile in the basement. Bloody clothing, a lab coat stained with red, a sock soaked in blood. The items were sent for immediate DNA testing. The results confirmed Annie Lee's blood, but there was another DNA profile mixed with hers, someone else's DNA, someone who worked in that building. Investigators began scrutinizing the security footage more carefully, tracking the movements of everyone who'd been in the building that day. One person's pattern stood out immediately. Raymond Clark III, a 24-year-old animal research technician. Clark had been in the building at the same time as Annie, but more disturbing was what the cameras showed him doing in the hours after she disappeared. On September 8th at 3:30 p.m., 5.5 hours after Annie entered the building, CCTV footage captured Raymond Clark entering room G13, the lab where Annie had been working. He stayed inside for several minutes. When he emerged, he was carrying a steel pushcart with a box of industrial cleaning wipes on top. Security footage tracked Clark as he made multiple trips between different rooms in the basement. His keycard records showed he entered room G13 and another secure room far more times that day than on any previous day. He was moving methodically, purposefully. Then investigators found something that made their blood run cold. During the initial search, a graduate student had shown police a box of white balls, industrial cleaning cloths, sitting on a steel pushcart in room G13. The box had visible blood spatters on it, but when police returned to document the evidence, the box had been moved. The blood-spattered side was now turned toward the wall, hidden from view. Security cameras showed exactly who had moved that box, Raymond Clark. Clark was called in for questioning on September 10th. He told investigators he'd seen Annie leave the building around 3:15 p.m., 15 minutes before he left. Just before a fire alarm went off. The alarm had been triggered by an autoclave, a machine used to sterilize lab equipment. But there was no record of Annie exiting the building. No camera footage, no keycard swipe, nothing. When officers looked at Raymond Clark more closely, they noticed scratches on his face and left arm, fresh scratches. When asked about them, Clark claimed they came from his cat. On September 13th, Annie Lee's wedding day, searchers made a horrific discovery. An alert investigator noticed a foul odor coming from a utility panel in the basement. Cadaver dogs were brought in. They immediately alerted to a cable chase behind the wall of the laboratory. Inside that narrow space, hidden behind insulation and utility panels, investigators found Annie Lee's body. She'd been stuffed upside down into the wall cavity, wearing surgical gloves. Her underwear pulled down around her ankles. Her jaw was broken. Her collarbone shattered. The Connecticut medical examiner determined that Annie died from traumatic asphyxiation due to neck compression. She had been strangled to death. While Annie's family and fiancé, Jonathan Wadowski, mourned, police focused intensively on Raymond Clark. On September 15th, they searched his apartment in Middletown, Connecticut, and collected DNA samples. The forensic results were damning. The bloody sock found above the ceiling tile contained DNA from both Annie Lee and Raymond Clark. A lab coat discovered in a laundry bin also had both their DNA. Most importantly, a green ink pen found underneath Annie's body had her blood on it, and Raymond Clark's DNA. Police reviewed the building's electronic records. They discovered that Raymond Clark had signed into the secure facility using a green ink pen on September 8th, the day Annie disappeared. Surveillance footage from that morning showed Clark wearing an extra-large lab coat identical to the one found stained with Annie's blood. By afternoon, he was no longer wearing it. The evidence was overwhelming. On September 17, 2009, 9 days after Annie's disappearance, Raymond Clark III was arrested and charged with murder. At his arraignment, Clark was held on $3 million bail. He initially pleaded not guilty, maintaining his innocence for 18 months as prosecutors built their case. But the evidence was irrefutable. Security cameras had tracked Clark's every movement that day. His key cards showed him entering the murder room repeatedly. DNA evidence placed him at the crime scene. His attempts to clean up and hide evidence were documented on video. On March 17, 2011, exactly 18 months after his arrest, Raymond Clark changed his plea. In a small courtroom filled with reporters and Annie Lee's grieving family, Clark stood quietly and pleaded guilty to murder. He also entered an offered plea to attempted sexual assault, a plea that doesn't admit guilt but concedes there's enough evidence for conviction. Prosecutor David Strollo outlined the extensive forensic evidence. He described how Clark's computer entry cards precisely tracked his movements, showing he'd entered the rooms where Annie was killed far more times on September 8th than any previous day. He explained how police found Clark moving evidence, hiding blood spatters, attempting to erase his DNA from the crime scene, all captured on the building's 75 security cameras. To this day, no one knows exactly why Raymond Clark killed Annie Lee. Sources familiar with the investigation told reporters it stemmed from a workplace dispute, possibly related to how animals were being cared for in the lab. Annie was known for being meticulous, detail-oriented, someone who followed protocols exactly. Clark was territorial about the animals under his care. Whatever sparked the confrontation on September 8th, it escalated into violence, into murder, into a brutal killing that stole a brilliant young woman's life just 5 days before she was supposed to walk down the aisle. On June 3, 2011, Raymond Clark was sentenced to 44 years in prison. He also received a concurrent 20-year sentence for attempted sexual assault. At his sentencing, Clark finally spoke. His voice was quiet, almost inaudible. I alone am responsible for the death of Annie Lee and causing tremendous pain to all who loved and cared about Annie. Annie's mother, Vivian Lee, delivered a victim impact statement that left the courtroom in tears. She spoke directly to the man who'd stolen her daughter. I will never hug Annie again. The world will never know what she had to offer. I will never see her walking down the aisle. Clark is currently serving his sentence at Cheshire Correctional Institution in Connecticut. He won't be eligible for release until September 16, 2053. He'll be almost 70 years old. But all the security cameras in the world, all the electronic key cards and locked doors, couldn't protect Annie Lee from a coworker who decided that a workplace disagreement was worth killing over. The cameras captured everything except the one thing that mattered most. They couldn't capture him before he struck. Annie Lee wrote an article just months before her death titled Crime and Safety in New Haven for Yale Medical School's B magazine. In it, she offered safety tips to fellow students. The cruel irony is that she was murdered in what should have been the safest place on campus, a high-security research facility monitored by dozens of cameras. On September 13, 2009, instead of exchanging vows with Jonathan Wadowski, Annie Lee's family held her funeral. More than 600 people attended the memorial service in California. Jonathan acted as head usher, his head bowed, mourning the woman he would never marry. Monsignor James Kidder, Annie's former pastor, told mourners, "If we take those special qualities of hers and continue to make them our own, then she will continue to live in us." The CCTV footage documented Raymond Clark's every movement on the day he murdered Annie Lee. It showed him moving her body, hiding evidence, cleaning blood, trying desperately to cover his tracks. But the cameras couldn't bring her back. They could only ensure her killer would never walk free. From the halls of Yale to a British shopping center, our next case takes us to 1993, to one of the most heartbreaking crimes ever caught on camera. A crime that changed child protection laws forever and proved that sometimes the most dangerous predators are the ones we least suspect. Bootle, Merseyside, England, February 12, 1993. This case is different from the others. This case will test everything you think you know about evil, because sometimes the monsters don't wear masks. Sometimes they're just children. What you're about to hear is one of the most disturbing crimes ever captured on camera, a crime that would change child protection laws across the entire United Kingdom. A crime so shocking that 31 years later, people still remember exactly where they were when they heard the news. 2-year-old James Patrick Bulger had big blue eyes and light brown hair. He was a happy, smiling toddler who loved making his parents laugh. On that Friday afternoon, his mother, 25-year-old Denise Bulger, took him shopping at the New Strand Shopping Center in Bootle, near Liverpool. It was a routine trip, nothing special, just a mother running errands with her little boy. At approximately 3:30 p.m., Denise stepped into A.R. Tim's butcher shop to place an order. James was right beside her, or so she thought. She turned away for just a moment, maybe 10 seconds, 20 at most. When she looked back, James was gone. Denise frantically searched the immediate area, calling James's name. Other shoppers joined the search. Security guards were alerted. Within minutes, the entire shopping center was looking for a missing 2-year-old boy in a blue anorak. But James Bulger was already gone, and the security cameras had witnessed everything. At 3:42 p.m., just 12 minutes after James disappeared, CCTV footage captured an image that would become seared into the British public's consciousness forever. The grainy black and white video showed 2 older boys walking through the shopping center with a small toddler between them. One boy held James's hand gently, leading him toward the exit. To casual observers in the mall that day, they looked like brothers, like an older sibling taking care of a younger one. Several shoppers even remembered seeing them. One witness later recalled hearing one of the older boys calling out, "Come on, baby," when the toddler lagged behind. Nobody suspected anything was wrong. Nobody intervened. Nobody could have imagined what was about to happen. Because those 2 older boys weren't James's brothers. They were 10-year-old strangers named Robert Thompson and John Venables, and they were leading James Bulger to his death. For the next 2.5 hours, Thompson and Venables walked James on a horrific 2.5-mile journey through Liverpool. 38 witnesses saw them during this time. 38 people noticed something seemed off. A small child crying, bruises forming on his face, older boys roughly dragging him along. Some witnesses asked if the little boy was okay. Thompson and Venables lied smoothly. "He's our little brother. We're taking him to the police station. He's lost and we're helping him." Nobody called the police. Nobody stopped them, and the cameras kept recording. At one point, the boys dropped James on his head near a canal, leaving him on the ground crying. A woman passed by and saw the injured toddler but walked on without intervening. When Venables and Thompson called for James to follow them again, he did, because what choice does a terrified 2-year-old have? By now, James's forehead was visibly bruised and cut. The boys pulled the hood of his blue anorak over his head to try to conceal the injury. More passers-by noticed. More people saw a small child in distress, but no one acted decisively enough to save him. At approximately 5:45 p.m., Thompson and Venables led James Bulger to a railway embankment near Walton Lane. It was secluded, isolated, hidden from view. What happened next is almost too horrific to describe. The 2 10-year-olds subjected James to an attack of unimaginable brutality. They threw paint in his face. They kicked him. They stamped on him. They beat him with bricks and an iron bar, a railway fish plate weighing 10 kilograms. James sustained 42 injuries to his head, face, and body. His skull was fractured in 10 places. Many of the injuries to his legs were inflicted after the boys had stripped him from the waist down. When they were finished, when James Patrick Bulger lay dying on that railway embankment, Thompson and Venables placed his body across the train tracks and covered it with bricks and stones. They hoped an oncoming train would make it look like an accident. Then they walked home. 2 10-year-old boys covered in pain and blood, walking calmly back to their families as if nothing had happened. On Sunday, February 14, 2 days after James disappeared, a group of teenagers discovered his body on the railway tracks. He'd been cut in half by a train exactly as his killers had intended. The scene was so horrific that experienced police officers were traumatized. Denise Bulger was called to the police station. After an agonizing 40-minute wait, Detective Jeff McDonald told her words no parent should ever hear. "We've found him, and it's not good news." The investigation moved quickly. Police had the CCTV footage from the New Strand Shopping Center showing 2 boys leading James away. But the images were grainy, pixelated, difficult to analyze. The Ministry of Defense was called in to enhance the footage. Frame by frame, technicians worked to improve the quality to determine the ages of the two boys captured on camera. The breakthrough came from an anonymous phone call. A woman who'd seen the enhanced CCTV images on television recognized the two boys as Robert Thompson and John Venables, known troublemakers from the area who'd been playing truant from school on February 12th. A quick check of school attendance records confirmed both boys had been absent that day. On Thursday, February 18th, 6 days after James's murder, police raided the homes of both boys and placed them under arrest. Thompson was taken to Walton Lane Police Station. Venables was brought to Liverpool's Lower Lane Police Station. Blood, hair, and fingernail samples were taken from both suspects. Their clothing was seized for forensic analysis. The evidence was overwhelming. Forensic tests revealed that both boys had the same blue paint on their clothing that was found on James Bulger's body. Both had blood on their shoes. The blood on Thompson's shoe was matched to James through DNA profiling. A pattern of bruising on James's right cheek perfectly matched the sole pattern of Thompson's shoe. Paint marks in the toe cap of Venables' shoes indicated he'd used significant force when kicking the toddler. During initial interviews, both boys denied involvement. But on Friday, February 19th, nearly 1 p.m., John Venables found himself alone with his parents during a break in questioning. Police were listening through surveillance equipment. Venables suddenly broke down. He couldn't take it anymore. Through tears, he confessed to being involved in James's murder.
You're under caution, and you do not have to say anything unless you wish to do so, but anything you say may be given in evidence. Now, you understand that, don't you, John?
Yeah.
All right. I have a photograph here, which is a video camera photograph.
That's me. That's me. That's right.
So, the boy holding James's hand is you.
Yeah.
And the boy ahead of you, in the dark jacket and trousers, Robert Thompson. And what was it you told us?
That I killed James.
Right. Now, I know that took a lot of doing.
I can't tell you anything else.
Why?
That's the worst bit.
Why? Okay, right. I know that's the worst bit, but you know what you did. Why? Think about it. Why? And just tell us what happened.
We took him on the rail shop and started throwing bricks at him. And then
Who did?
Robbie.
Why did he throw bricks at him?
No.
Where did the stones and the bar hit him?
In the head.
Was he bleeding?
Or neither.
Where was he bleeding from?
Face. Then it was Robert's idea to kill him.
Okay.
Should finish now because I can't speak anymore.
With this admission, police could now interrogate Thompson more aggressively. Though Thompson refused to fully admit his guilt, investigators had more than enough evidence. On Saturday, February 20th, 1993, 8 days after James Bulger's murder, Robert Thompson and John Venables were charged with abduction and murder. They became known in court documents as Child A, Thompson, and Child B, Venables, to protect their identities during pretrial proceedings. The trial began on November 1st, 1993, at Sessions House in Preston. Despite their young age, Thompson and Venables were tried as adults in a full Crown Court proceeding. The judge and court officials wore legal regalia. The accused sat in the dock, raised on special chairs so they could see over the adult-sized furniture. For 3 weeks, the nation watched in horror as prosecutors laid out the evidence. The CCTV footage from the shopping center was played repeatedly, that haunting image of two boys leading a trusting toddler to his death. 38 witnesses testified about seeing the trio during their 2.5-mile journey. The pathologist spent 33 agonizing minutes describing James's injuries in clinical detail. Many spectators broke down in tears. The defense attorneys argued for diminished responsibility, citing the boys' troubled backgrounds. Thompson's father had been violent and abusive. Both boys came from broken homes. There were suggestions that violent movies, specifically the horror film Child's Play 3, might have influenced them. But police investigations found no evidence the boys had even seen that film. The theory was dismissed. On November 24th, 1993, after just 6 hours of deliberation, the jury returned their verdict. Guilty, both boys, guilty of murder, guilty of abduction, guilty of attempted abduction, referring to another incident earlier that same day when they tried to lure away a different 2-year-old boy, but were stopped by the child's mother. Mr. Justice Moreland sentenced Robert Thompson and John Venables to be detained at Her Majesty's pleasure with a minimum term of 8 years. In his sentencing remarks, he said words that echo to this day. The killing of James Bulger was an act of unparalleled evil and barbarity. At ages 10, Thompson and Venables became the youngest convicted murderers in modern British history. The aftermath of the James Bulger case sent shockwaves through British society. How could 2 children commit such a brutal crime? What does it say about innocence, about evil, about the nature of childhood itself? The case sparked massive increases in CCTV installation across the United Kingdom. In 1993, there were just 10 CCTV systems active in Britain. By 2005, there were 4 million cameras, more than any other country in Europe. Child protection laws were overhauled. The way society viewed juvenile offenders changed fundamentally. Thompson and Venables were released on parole in 2001 at age 18, given new identities and lifetime anonymity orders. The conditions of their release remain some of the most stringent in British legal history. Robert Thompson has reportedly lived quietly under his new identity and has not reoffended. John Venables has not been so fortunate. He's been recalled to prison multiple times for possessing child pornography. In 2010, again in 2017. His most recent parole hearing in December 2023 was denied. He remains behind bars. James's mother, Denise Fergus, now remarried after her split from Ralph Bulger, has spent 3 decades campaigning for justice for her son. In 2008, she told The Observer, "I can never forgive Thompson and Venables for the horrendous, calculated, cold-blooded murder of James." She established the James Bulger Memorial Trust to provide support and holidays for disadvantaged children, turning unspeakable tragedy into something that might help others. The CCTV footage from the New Strand shopping center showed Robert Thompson and John Venables selecting their victim. It showed them leading James Bulger away while 38 adults watched and did nothing. It documented the beginning of a crime so monstrous that 3 decades later, Britain still hasn't fully processed what happened. The cameras caught the killers red-handed, but they couldn't stop 2 children from becoming monsters. James Patrick Bulger would have turned 33 years old this year. Instead, he remains forever frozen at age 2 in that grainy surveillance footage, a little boy in a blue anorak holding the hand of his killer. From the streets of Liverpool to the quiet suburbs of London, our final case brings us to 2021 and a murder so brazen, so meticulously recorded by surveillance cameras, that it took investigators just days to piece together exactly what happened when a woman was killed for her inheritance money. Wembley, North London, June 11, 2021. 67-year-old Mi Quen Chong, known to her friends as Deborah, was a devout Christian who believed in helping others. Despite suffering from paranoid schizophrenia and struggling with her mental health after her husband's death, Deborah maintained her faith and her kindness. She attended church regularly. She wrote letters to then Prime Minister Boris Johnson and Prince Charles seeking guidance. She was vulnerable, lonely, and generous to a fault. That generosity would cost her everything. Deborah had befriended a woman named Jemma Mitchell through their church group. Mitchell, a 38-year-old osteopath, presented herself as a spiritual healer. She offered Deborah comfort, companionship, and emotional support during her darkest days. The 2 women grew close, sharing their struggles and dreams. But Jemma Mitchell wasn't the healer she pretended to be. She was a predator, and the cameras were about to document one of the most calculated murders in recent British history. Mitchell and her mother lived in a dilapidated £4 million property in Willesden, North London. They'd been scammed out of £230,000 by builders who'd promised to add another floor to their home. The renovation project had stalled. Money was tight. Mitchell was desperate. She turned to her vulnerable friend Deborah for help. Deborah, wanting to assist someone she trusted, initially agreed to give Mitchell £200,000 for the building project. The two exchanged numerous text messages discussing the arrangement. But as time passed, Deborah began having second thoughts. Her mental health was declining. She needed that money for herself. In early June 2021, Deborah withdrew her offer. She sent Mitchell a message urging her to sell the house instead and enjoy the money because life is too short. Those words, life is too short, would prove tragically prophetic. For Jemma Mitchell, losing that £200,000 was unacceptable. She'd already made plans. She'd already spent the money in her mind. And if Deborah wouldn't give it to her willingly, Mitchell would simply take everything. On the morning of June 11th, 2021, at 8:11 a.m., CCTV cameras captured Jemma Mitchell arriving at Deborah Chong's home in Wembley. She was pulling a large blue suitcase behind her, a suitcase that appeared relatively empty and easy to maneuver. Mitchell entered the house. For the next 4 hours and 33 minutes, no cameras could see what was happening inside, but investigators would later piece together the horror. Mitchell struck Deborah over the head with a weapon, fracturing her skull in multiple places. Whether Deborah died from the blow or from subsequent strangulation is unclear. The body was too decomposed for pathologists to determine an exact cause of death. What is certain is that Jemma Mitchell murdered her friend in cold blood. Then came the truly chilling part. Mitchell, who boasted on her professional website about being skilled in human dissection and neuroanatomy, decapitated Deborah Chong's body. She broke several of Deborah's ribs, forcing the corpse into that blue suitcase. She stuffed her friend's remains inside like luggage, zipping it closed. At 1:13 p.m., 4 hours and 33 minutes after entering, CCTV footage captured Mitchell emerging from Deborah's house. The difference was stark, undeniable, damning. The blue suitcase now bulged at the seams. It was visibly heavier, struggling against the wheels as Mitchell pulled it. The footage showed her straining, adjusting her grip, stopping frequently to catch her breath. She also carried a smaller bag, filled with Deborah's financial documents and personal papers that Mitchell had stolen from the house. For the next 2 hours, security cameras across London tracked Mitchell's journey home. She dragged that suitcase through multiple streets, sometimes stopping to rest, always checking over her shoulder. Eventually, she hailed a taxi to complete the journey to her house in Bronsbury Park. The driver had no idea he was transporting a corpse. For 2 weeks, Jemma Mitchell kept Deborah Chong's body hidden in the garden of her family home. While the body decomposed in the summer heat, Mitchell methodically executed the rest of her plan. She used Deborah's computer to forge a will, a document falsely claiming that Deborah had left her entire £700,000 estate to Jemma Mitchell and her mother. Mitchell even named herself and her mother as executors. But there was a problem. The forged will needed witnesses. Mitchell found a solution in the cruelest way imaginable. A neighbor had recently died in May 2021. Mitchell stole that deceased person's identity documents and reactivated their mobile phone. She used the dead neighbor's identity as a witness signature on the forged will, making a ghost sign for a murder victim's fake testament. Mitchell also sent false messages to Deborah's lodger, claiming Deborah had gone to visit family friends near the coast for a year to clear her head. She even emailed a missing persons charity with a fabricated report. The irony was chilling. Mitchell wrote that Deborah planned to stay somewhere close to the ocean. On June 26, 2021, 15 days after the murder, Mitchell rented a silver Volvo using the dead neighbor's phone. She loaded Deborah's body, still in that blue suitcase, into the trunk. Then she began the 200-mile drive to Salcombe, a picturesque seaside town in Devon. Traffic cameras along the route captured the Volvo's journey southward. But fate intervened in an unexpected way. Somewhere near Bristol, the Volvo blew a tire. Mitchell was forced to pull into a service station and call for roadside assistance. CCTV footage from the service station showed Mitchell inside the shop, nervously pacing, buying drinks, waiting for help, all while a decomposing body sat in her trunk just meters away. The tire was fixed. Mitchell continued her journey. More cameras tracked her arrival in Salcombe. Footage showed the Volvo driving down Bennett Road, a quiet area near woodland walking paths. Mitchell parked. She removed the suitcase from the trunk, and she dumped Deborah Chong's decapitated body in an overgrown area beside the footpath. The body was redressed in clothes meant for a larger woman, an attempt to obscure identity. Deborah's severed head was placed several meters away from the torso, partially hidden under leaves. Mitchell left Deborah there, her friend, her victim, her source of stolen money, lying in the woods like discarded trash. Then she drove back to London and waited. On June 27, 2021, the day after Mitchell dumped the body, a family on holiday discovered Deborah's remains while walking their dog. They were traumatized by what they found: a badly decomposed headless corpse with Bible verses and church cards scattered nearby. Police immediately launched a murder investigation. When they searched the surrounding area, they found Deborah's skull a few meters from her body. A post-mortem examination revealed skull fractures consistent with being struck by a weapon and multiple rib fractures consistent with being forced into a confined space. Detectives began interviewing people who knew Deborah. One name kept appearing: Jemma Mitchell. Officers reviewed CCTV footage from around Deborah's home. What they found was damning beyond belief. The cameras showed Mitchell arriving with an empty suitcase at 8:11 a.m. They showed her leaving with a bulging, heavy suitcase at 1:13 p.m. They tracked her journey across London, struggling with the weight, stopping repeatedly, pulling a corpse through the streets in broad daylight. Traffic cameras placed her rental car at the exact location where Deborah's body was found. Service station footage showed her stopping for a tire repair with a body in her trunk. The digital trail was irrefutable. On July 6, 2021, police raided Mitchell's home and arrested her. Body-worn camera footage captured the moment, Mitchell appearing confused, asking what this was about, feigning ignorance. During a thorough search of the property, detectives found the forged will naming Mitchell as the beneficiary of Deborah's estate, Deborah's stolen financial documents and personal papers, the deceased neighbor's identity documents Mitchell had used as a fake witness, the large blue suitcase stored on top of a neighbor's shed. Although Mitchell had thoroughly cleaned the suitcase, forensic scientists found something she'd missed: a blood-stained tea towel tucked into one of the pockets. DNA testing confirmed the blood belonged to Deborah Chong. Mitchell was charged with murder on July 9, 2021. During police interviews, Mitchell responded to every single question with 2 words: no comment. She refused to explain herself, refused to provide an alibi, refused to acknowledge what the cameras had captured. She remained silent, stone-faced, defiant. At trial, Mitchell declined to give evidence in her own defense. Her lawyers argued there was no proof Deborah's body had been in that suitcase, despite the obvious visual evidence and the DNA on the tea towel. They claimed Mitchell's £4 million property and £93,000 in personal savings meant she had no financial motive. Prosecutor Deanna here methodically destroyed these arguments. She walked the jury through the CCTV footage frame by frame, showing the timeline of Mitchell's movements matching perfectly with the murder and disposal. She presented the forged will created on Mitchell's own computer. She showed how Mitchell had used a dead neighbor's identity to fake witness signatures. The evidence was overwhelming. On October 27, 2022, after just 7 hours of deliberation, the jury returned their verdict: guilty of murder. Mitchell showed no emotion. She sat passively, staring ahead, as if the verdict had nothing to do with her. The following day, October 28, 2022, Judge Richard Marks KC sentenced Jemma Mitchell in a historic proceeding, the first murder sentencing of a woman to be broadcast live on television in England and Wales. The judge's words were scathing.
You have shown absolutely no remorse, and it appears that you are in complete denial as to what you did, notwithstanding what, in my judgment, amounted to overwhelming evidence against you. The enormity of your crime is profoundly shocking, even more so given your apparent religious devotion, as well as the fact that Deborah Chong was a good friend to you and had shown you great kindness. The sentence of the court is one of life imprisonment, and the minimum term of imprisonment that you will in any event be required to serve will be 34 years, there will be deducted from that term the 475 days that you have spent in custody on remand, and the statutory surcharge will apply. Would you please take the defendant downstairs?
Life imprisonment. Minimum term, 34 years. Mitchell will not be eligible for parole until October 21st, 2056. She'll be 72 years old. Detective Chief Inspector Jim Eastwood, who led the investigation, spoke to reporters after the sentencing. Mitchell has never accepted responsibility for Deborah's murder, so there are questions which remain unanswered. Why she kept her body for a fortnight, why she decapitated her, why she deposited her remains in Salcombe. What we do know is that these were evil acts carried out by an evil woman, and the only motive clearly was one of financial gain. Deborah's sister, Amy Chong, provided a victim impact statement from Malaysia. She described suffering sleepless nights, struggling to comprehend how her sister endured such a horrifying ordeal. She said no one in their right mind would mutilate another person the way Mitchell had. The murder left a huge bottomless hole in the family's life. Even after the conviction, Mitchell's mother, Hilary Collard, maintained her daughter's innocence. She claimed the suitcase contained crockery, cutlery, and tea towels rather than a body. She called her daughter a silly girl who was really bright but messed up. The cameras told a different story. Jemma Mitchell befriended a vulnerable woman, promised to heal her, gained her trust, then murdered her for money when that trust became inconvenient. She decapitated her victim, forged documents, stole identities, and drove 200 miles to dump the body like garbage. All of it caught on camera. Every step, every lie, every cold, calculated move. The CCTV footage became the prosecution's most powerful weapon. Visual evidence that Mitchell could never explain away, no matter how many times she said no comment. 5 cases, 5 killers. 5 sets of surveillance cameras that captured evil in action. Stephen Port, who drugged and murdered 4 young men, his crimes recorded from the very first victim, but ignored for far too long. Koci Selamaj, who traveled to London specifically to kill a stranger, his violent attack on Sabina Nessa documented in horrifying detail. Raymond Clark, who murdered his co-worker Annie Lee in a high-security research facility, every keycard swipe and movement tracked by 75 cameras. Robert Thompson and John Venables, 2 10-year-old boys who led James Bulger to his death in footage that haunted a nation. And Jemma Mitchell, who murdered her friend for money, stuffed her decapitated body in a suitcase and dragged it through London in broad daylight, all while cameras watched. These cases prove something profound about modern life. We're never truly alone. In cities across the world, millions of cameras record our every move. They capture our best moments and our worst. They document our humanity and our monstrosity. For these 5 killers, CCTV became their undoing. The footage they never knew was recording became the evidence that convicted them. The silent witnesses became the voices that spoke for victims who could no longer speak for themselves. But here's what I promised you at the beginning. That shocking detail, the information even the trials didn't fully expose. In the Stephen Port case, there was additional CCTV footage that police initially failed to review. Cameras near Port's apartment captured him on multiple occasions, researching locations to dispose of bodies. Footage showed him visiting St. Margaret's Church graveyard at odd hours, weeks before he murdered Gabriel Kovari and Daniel Whitworth, essentially scouting the location where he would later dump their bodies. This footage was only discovered during the subsequent investigation into police failures, revealing that Port had been planning multiple murders long before he claimed they were accidental overdoses. That footage sat unwatched in evidence storage while Gabriel and Daniel died deaths that could have been prevented. While Port was serving just 8 months for perverting the course of justice after Anthony's murder, he was already planning his next kills, and the cameras were recording it all. If there's one lesson from these 5 cases, it's this: cameras can catch killers, but only if someone is watching. Thank you for staying until the end. If you found this video compelling, disturbing, or thought-provoking, please hit that subscribe button for Criminal Minds Archives. Like this video, share it with someone who appreciates true crime done right, factual, respectful to victims, and unflinching in its examination of how justice is served. Drop a comment below. Which case shocked you the most? Are you glad we have so many surveillance cameras protecting us? Or does it make you uncomfortable knowing you're constantly being watched? And most importantly, remember the victims. Anthony Walgate, Gabriel Kovari, Daniel Whitworth, Jack Taylor, Sabina Nessa, Annie Lowe, James Bulger, and Mi Quinn Chong. They weren't just statistics. They were people with families, dreams, and futures stolen by evil. The cameras caught their killers red-handed. Now we must never forget their names. Until next time, stay safe out there. And remember, someone is always watching.